On the night of April 14th, 1865, at the Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., during a play, John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer who felt some type of way about the outcome of the Civil War and where the country was headed direction-wise, quietly made his way up some stairs and went towards the booth of President Abraham Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth, an actor himself, had performed many times at this theater, so the hallways and stairs were quite familiar to him. Lincoln and his wife, along with other members of their entourage or squad, were peacefully seated in the booth, looking out over the audience watching the play. The play was called Our American Cousin. It was a comedy and satire about American life and culture, written by a playwright named Tom Taylor. In the 1860s, the American population was about 31 million people, and after watching almost 600,000 men get deleted during the Civil War, the country was in a dark place. I mean, people were practically desperate for any type of comedic relief. Now, as the play began its climactic rise, a dark figure would lean into your boy Honest Abe's booth and slowly aim a .41 caliber Derringer pistol at the back of his head, and with the pull of a trigger, John Wilkes Booth would smoke the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, with a shot to the back of the dome. Before the smoke could even settle, John Wilkes Booth was already making his way to the exit. But before he could escape, one of the members of Lincoln's squad, Henry Rathbone, an officer, grabbed onto him and tried to tackle him to the floor. In the midst of the complete chaos and sounds of screaming, John Wilkes Booth pulled out a knife and stabbed Henry Rathbone, causing him to let go. But that brief scuffle was enough to thwart your boy Wilkes Booth's main plan of escape. Seeing that aides and attendees were now rushing towards them, John Wilkes Booth, realizing that he was trapped, would climb onto the balcony and jump. After landing on the stage down below, he would raise his knife and loudly shout to the panic-stricken crowd, "Sic semper tyrannis," Latin for "thus always the tyrant." Now, after saying this, the unhinged John Wilkes Booth would dip out and make his escape. Now, you might be asking yourself, did Abraham Lincoln have any bodyguards? And if he did, where were they? Well, John Frederick Parker, who was in charge of protecting the president that night, decided that during the play's intermission, he would go out to a nearby drinking joint and get faded and fall asleep. It is unclear whether Parker ever returned to the theater, but he was not at his post when John Wilkes Booth collapsed the president. As for your main man Abraham Lincoln, the damage was done. The bullet had entered through Lincoln's left ear and lodged behind his right eye. He was completely paralyzed and barely breathing. Soldiers would carry him across 10th Street to a boarding house which was next to the theater. Despite the doctor's best efforts, 9 hours later at 7:22 a.m. on April 15th, your main man, President Abraham Lincoln, stopped existing on Earth. The hunt for John Wilkes Booth would begin immediately. Now, your boy John Wilkes Booth had not acted alone that night. Two other homies of his had planned to also smoke the Vice President Andrew Johnson and the Secretary of State William H. Seward. While one of the assassins was able to attack and stab the Secretary of State, he would ultimately fail at deleting him. The other would-be assassin, responsible for knocking off Vice President Andrew Johnson, would wind up feeling some type of way and losing his nerve. He ultimately wound up at the bar getting faded, aka drunk, leaving your boy John Wilkes Booth as the only successful assassin. After shooting Lincoln, John Wilkes Booth fled Ford's Theater by stage door to the alley, where his getaway horse was being held for him by another co-conspirator. Now, it is widely believed that John Wilkes Booth had broken his leg during his jump from the balcony. If true, this would have greatly slowed down his escape. Now, both men having already planned their escape route, which went through southern Maryland and took advantage of the lack of telegraph lines and railroads, would set off at breakneck speeds. The pathway was also dotted with potential Confederate sympathizers they could drop in on if things got sketchy. The escape route was also swampy, which made it ideal for escaping into rural Virginia. At around midnight, both men would arrive at Surratt's Tavern, where they had earlier stored supplies and weapons. After gearing up, both men would set out southward, stopping at a number of houses along the way to rest and hide. Soon your boy John Wilkes Booth and his buddy, who was named David Harold, would be informed about the massive bounty that was placed on their heads. The War Department was advertising a $100,000 reward, which is like $2 million in today's money, to anyone who had information leading to the capture of your boy Johnny Wilkes Booth and his accomplices. Also, thousands of federal troops were sent to comb the countryside for them, searching through the swamps and ditches, knocking on every door and searching every barn and cabin. You can probably imagine how many bounty hunters must have been out searching as well for your boy John Wilkes Booth. Hearing this information would make your boy Wilkes Booth feel some type of way, so instead of continuing further on his escape route, he would turn aside and hide in the deep Maryland woods. But his troubles were only just beginning. While he hid in the woods with the help of people who sympathized with his plight. Knowing that his only escape route was crossing over the Potomac River, he would continue to wait for an opportunity. The whole area was crawling with bounty hunters and federal troops. On April 20th, he would learn through reading a newspaper that a number of his co-conspirators had been caught. Your boy John Wilkes Booth was surprised to find little public sympathy for his actions, especially from those anti-Lincoln newspapers that had previously harshly criticized the president during his life. During this entire time, the vast majority of the nation was in mourning. About 7 million people lined the railroad tracks to pay their respects and condolences to Abraham Lincoln as his coffin traveled by rail over 1,600 miles from Washington to his eventual resting place in Springfield, Illinois. On April 20th, under the cover of night, John Wilkes Booth and his accomplice David Harold would head south to Pope's Creek, where they would finally attempt to cross the Potomac River. John Wilkes Booth and David Harold would steal a small paddle boat and cross the river, but instead of landing in Virginia, the two would land at Blossom Point. The two fugitives would try again, and on their second attempt, they would finally land in Virginia. However, on April 24th, Lieutenant Edward P. Doherty was dispatched from Washington at 2 p.m. with a detachment of 26 Union soldiers from the 16th New York Cavalry Regiment to capture Booth in Virginia. This dude and his host of men were accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Everton Conger, an intelligence officer. The detachment floated 70 miles down the Potomac River in a steamboat, landing at Belle Plaine, Virginia at 10 p.m. The pursuers crossed the Rappahannock River and immediately started to track Booth and Harold. The trail would lead the men to Richard H. Garrett's farm, about 2 miles south of Port Royal, Virginia. Your boy John Wilkes Booth and his buddy Harold had been led to the farm on April 24th by William S. Jett, a former private in the 9th Virginia Cavalry, whom they had met before crossing the river. Now, the Garrett family was not aware of the assassination of your boy Abe and who John Wilkes Booth actually was. News back in those times took a while to get around. So that night, the Garretts had dinner with John Wilkes Booth and his buddy, and as they ate a hearty country meal, they would be informed that the last remnants of the Confederate Army finally surrendered, 100% ending the war, dashing your boy John Wilkes Booth hopes of revitalizing the war. At that very moment, he realized that he had failed to break the Union and its resolve. The Garrett family would also learn of the massive bag that the Wilkes Booth capture would bring. However, the Garretts, unaware of who Wilkes Booth truly was, did nothing and planned to allow him to continue on his journey, with his plans now being to reach Mexico. However, your boy Baldnar Colonel Everton Conger and his Union soldiers tracked down Jett, and after working him over and interrogating him, they would learn of John Wilkes Booth's location at the Garrett's farm. Before dawn, on April 26, Union soldiers would finally catch up with the fugitives. John Wilkes Booth and his homie David Harold would immediately hide in one of the tobacco barns on the property. The Union soldiers would surround the area and immediately demand for their surrender. Your main man, David Harold, hearing this, would immediately surrender and bounce straight out, abandoning his boy John Wilkes Booth. However, John Wilkes Booth refused to surrender, declaring that he was getting ready to bring the heat. So Colonel Conger and his soldiers set the joint on fire in an effort to smoke him out. It was their desire to bring him in alive. However, as John Wilkes Booth moved around inside the blazing barn, he would catch a bullet in the neck of one of the soldiers who claimed Booth pointed a gun at him through the window. John Wilkes Booth, being fatally wounded, would be dragged from the burning building and placed on the Garrett family's front porch. The soldiers would examine his injuries, concluding that there was nothing to be done for him. As he lay there expiring, paralyzed, he would whisper to those who stood by him to tell his mother that he died for his country. 2 hours later, your boy John Wilkes Booth expired and was no longer existing on Earth. In his pocket was found a diary where he wrote about Abraham Lincoln's deletion. Quote, "Our country owed all her troubles to him, and God simply made me the instrument of his punishment," end quote. After 12 days, the hunt for John Wilkes Booth, the world's most infamous assassin, was finally over. As for David Harold and a number of other co-conspirators, they were tried and executed. The assassination of Abraham Lincoln would have significant consequences for American history and politics. However, Abraham Lincoln's leadership during the turbulent times of the Civil War and his stance against slavery, along with his untimely demise, have contributed to making him one of America's most revered presidents to this very day. So in some ways, John Wilkes Booth helped turn Abraham Lincoln into an immortal figure in America. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment. Feedback is much appreciated. You guys have a wonderful day. Much love. Peace.